Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the House of Footy podcast. I'm Jack Hudson, and joining me as always is Port Adelaide legend Warren Tredrea. Treaders, how are you, mate?
Mate, we're in cricket season. What are we talking about footy for?
Because the footy cycle never dies. It
Oh,
never
does it
dies.
not? Oh, mate.
Oh,
And geez, some bumper. We spoke in our last episode about how this is the go time for signing
mm,
contracts. And um, yeah, like Brandon Starcevich remains at Brisbane till 25. He was contracted for 24, got an extra year on top. I assume gets a bit more security, a little bit more money to lock that away. But then, yeah, we've seen some bumper deals fall in the last 3 months. Aaron Norton, 8 years, a Western Australian native to keep him out of free agency, through to 2032, which was the longest in the AFL. For a bloke who I think it's a sensational player who launches the footy, he's been largely inconsistent the last couple of years.
mm.
But they're talking between 800 and $1 million for him. But then a team from Western Australia and a team from South Australia decided to go all in as well on young talent.
Yeah, it's a bit crazy how it's all going now. So obviously, Monday, Connor Rosie announces the Port Adelaide captain and the signing of an 8-year contract, which is wild for a South Australian player. And then Sean Darcy re-signing with Freo until the end of 2030, where there's every chance he is the backup ruckman for Luke Jackson when you really think about it. But they obviously want to play him as a ruck forward. But it's crazy how much these contracts are coming at. 8 years, it's a long time and a lot of room for stuff to go on. Like, what do you think?
Well, put it this way, they're both young. So
Yeah.
you go, if anyone's going to go the journey, that's fine. If you are going to invest an 8-year extension, which Port Adelaide have done to Connor Rosie, he's 23, 24 at the start of the year, close to, very close to the youngest ever captain, 8-year contract extension. If there's anyone who, touch wood,
Hmm.
you think is at least risk of it falling over or hurting a footy club. Now, when I say that, injury or concussion or something that's going to bite you where he can't play anywhere near or enter the field or anywhere near what we could have hoped.
Mm.
Now, he's a dual All-Australian, one-time best and fairest, which was 2022 season, was runner-up to Zach Butters, who had phenomenal years both for Port Adelaide. He's an SA boy, recently engaged to an SA girl. He's no flight risk. You go, yep, I can understand that deal.
Mm.
When Buddy Franklin left Hawthorn, who was a premiership team, and then goes to Sydney on a 9-year, $10 million deal, I thought, oh, I hope it lasts, but I don't think it will. Well, it did. It surprised
Yeah.
us. It was worth its weight in gold. I think he played in 2 more grand finals, possibly 3 more grand finals. And they didn't quite get the job done. But, geez, you look at finances, membership, him being a pin-up boy for the AFL, promoting it in a non-footy AFL state, I think it's wonderfully well. But and you talk about Sean Darcy getting a deal through to 2030 for a big bloke who was injured at the start of the year, committed for a further 6 years. You look at these types of deals and you go, well, you can see how they're going to work if you do it really well and if you have a little bit of luck. But it is an interesting situation. We're going back to my journey when I was a player. I finished in 2010. There was no free agency that was starting to come in.
Mm.
Players were really hamstrung with the club they wanted to stay at unless they wanted to get a trade or go elsewhere. And it made it really difficult for a move if you wanted to move because there'd either be a trade or they threatened the preseason draft. Now everyone goes, what's the preseason draft? No one uses that. So I think the real challenge here is it's gone from being super weighted the club's way, now super weighted the players' way, to a stage, yes, some clubs will push players out for trade
Mm.
and say they're not wanted anymore. We've seen that numerous times. But the reality is, I just think when you commit so long to young players, and I get these ones are ones who are young and can go the journey, but you just sit there and have this discussion and goes, does it need to adopt a different type of model? And
Mm.
before we jump into that, like if you look at Fremantle ruckman Sean Darcy, like he didn't play, had ankle surgery in July 2023, works in tandem with Luke Jackson. Luke Jackson was phenomenal. Darcy was borderline All-Australian ruckman. He was in the squad multiple year, won a club best and fairest, established himself as one of the best in the comp. So to commit another 6 years for a bloke who's a big, heavy bloke, there is a little bit of risk with that. But as they say, they want to keep him. They want to keep him long term, and they've locked him away long term. But I think it just begs the question to say that does the model need to change, or does the discussion and maturity around the discussion need to happen? Because if you look at the Rosie deal, you go, he's eligible for free agency, I think in 3 years' time.
Mm.
So we're in a situation where he's manager is doing what he's doing, right? He's probably going, well, yeah, we'll sign a 2-year extension or whatever it is to get through, because he had one more year, had the 2024 season to get you through to free agency. But then we want the average, which is about 6 years, for a big name free agent. It's going to get an average of 6 years to recommit. So we put it all together and you come up with 8. I get all that, but realistically, I think the biggest challenge here around is the longevity and the risk on the clubs, because if we've seen blokes who have going unbelievably well get a concussion, never play again, knee reconstruction, never play again, there is a massive risk. And I think that opens the door for a potential NBA type setup where if you go back and look at Supermax deals, the max you can get is a 5-year extension. That's if you stay at your current club. And I remember when Kevin Durant, we both follow a bit of basketball, Kevin Durant was at the Golden State Warriors, 2-time champion, MVP. He could either stay at the Golden State Warriors for a 5-year extension on the Supermax deal. And obviously they pay luxury tax with that, but that's separate. Or he could go on a 4-year deal, Supermax deal, but it was only 4 years, not 5, because he was going to a new club and he chose to go to Brooklyn. So maybe the AFL looks at a model like that to say, if you are going to leave, hey, and if you are, in NBA, those things that get you the Supermax deal are all stars. They are championships. They're MVPs. There's rookies of the year, rebound, defensive player of the year, all those things. In AFL, you could say all Australian. Certainly best and fairest, premiership player, leading goal kicker, rising star. So even a case like a young Nick Dacos, who's just about to sort of signed a bumper deal at Collingwood, he would almost fit a super deal. But if it's not the case and you're saying, well, we don't want to do any more deals above 5, 5's still a long time in footy. I remember I signed 3. I thought, oh, mate, sorted. Don't have to worry about that for years now. Blokes are talking 8. Like Connor Rosie is 23. If he goes this journey, he might be lucky enough to get a 1-year extension at the end, or he'll be retired. Like, it's unheard of that a bloke 23 commits himself to a club on a 1-year contract. Like, not a 1 year, a 1 contract. This is unbelievable. So maybe we need to take the pressure away from the managers dictating to the clubs, because we're seeing it with trade periods anyway. Like, players who necessarily clubs go, no, they're happy. No, this player wants to go, he wants to go here, and then they've already done the deal anyway. So I'd love to see a little bit of strength come back to the clubs, because I get it. Clubs had for 60, 70, 80, 100 years. You're not going anywhere. You're a local kid. You're going to play for us. You love the club. Your family play for the club. You want your name on a locker. Now it's fully professional. Maybe we need to come a little bit further back so the stupidity of the contracts gets caught out. And there's no doubt Port have done their due diligence and Fremantle have done their due diligence. And the Bulldogs have looked into it. Aaron Norton, yes, we're going to have to pay extra. He's a Western Australian boy. There's always that risk to pay extra outside. But I just sit back and go, it's only going to take one of these to really bite. Yeah. And these are the less likely to blow up, these ones. There's other ones you go, what did he get? How many years did he get? How much you paying him? Doesn't add up. So maybe you put it in performance-like. So if you do come up, the maximum you are eligible for is a 5 or 6 year if you start your own club, or it's a 4 or 5 year if you want to go elsewhere.
Yeah, well, you look at the Sean Darcy one, like, there's a ruckman. We've seen it with Brody Grundy.
Yeah.
Like,
That's a perfect example. Trelaw.
Yep.
Go all in, long-term deals on these guys, get them slightly below market rate. That, when they're own Grundy close to $1 million a year for a 5-year extension, it was all up a 7-year deal, I think. And now he's going to play for his 3rd club in his career.
Yeah. It's crazy how it's all worked out. But like in your playing days, you said that your 3-year deal was amazing, phenomenal. Like, what was the longest that you remember? Were you offered longer ever, or what was it like?
No, I got a 3-year extension. So I had 1 and then I got 3. So I had effectively 4 years.
Yeah. When was that? How early?
And that was, I still remember, and this is perspective, like, it was through the early 2000s. So I'd been a 3-time All-Australian, signed an extension 2004 for another 2 years, I think, on top, or 3 years on top. Come out in 2007. So I only signed a 2-year extension at the stage. There was a 3 extension earlier. But I had them overlap a lot of times. So when you're earning and performing better, they can tear it up and do a new one and give you more money in the current year. Those types of things, they're always creative accounting. Legal, but creative. Yes, in some cases you go, well, why do I sign now when I'm still on this crap money? They go, we can help you improve the crap money because you're performing well. We've got room in the salary cap and we can go elsewhere. But yeah, in the 2004 year, which was historically my best ever year, personally am like for the team, I was contracted for 4 and 5. They did 6 and 7 for Brian Cunningham, the long-time CEO, retired end of the year. We ended up winning the premiership. And then all of a sudden was named captain I played the 2005 year, had a really good year. Second, probably best ever year. Won a best and fairest, sort of 04 and 05. We won the premiership 04, fell away in 05, lost to a Crows home final.
Yep.
06 pre-season was named captain, hurt my knee in a trial game, and then spent the best part of 2.5 years getting back fit. So that was 2 years at the time. Would have been, I knew I was the highest paid player in the club, and I was hardly playing. And when I was playing, I wasn't anywhere near. I was a contributor. I wasn't anywhere near the expected performance that my pay warranted, if you know what I mean. So that's the worry I have, is that, yes, I had a knee problem. But before I'd had those injuries, I was that pre-season, I was 70 consecutive games. So it can bite at any time. But that's footy. And then the other bit with this discussion is footy is the most brutal sport there is. You can talk NFL, but they play 16 games. We play now, 23 over 24 weeks plus finals. They see a lot of the stuff where it's coming from. Footy is 360 degrees you can get hammered from. Yep, they've done a lot to reduce the head impact and all that, but how many times do we see ankle injuries, knee injuries, collision injuries, jumping injuries? A lot of those sports don't jump anywhere near like AFL does. It's an aerial and a ground game. So we don't have pads. Hardly any players, barely any few wear helmets. So the risk is far greater than I think any other sport in the land. And in saying that, the players deserve to get the money they're paying because they are playing that game, but the clubs have also got to be mindful to say, hey, we can't be going 10 years, 15 years, whatever. Like in baseball, as we've seen on another podcast we do, the big deal is, the Yankees have signed a gun Japanese pitcher. 70 million over 10 years, but they're going to pay him $2 million a year for 10 years, and the remaining, 68 million after the previous next 10 years. You can't manipulate that in the current system. So,
no.
Yeah, it's an interesting model, and that's why I think if you did an eligibility type model on performance, then there is a category that it all sits in, and I think the way the NBA does it does very, very well.
Let's have a look at the other side of it as well. So obviously long-term risks, but there's also the element of here. Bailey Smith obviously did his ACL this week, missed this year. He's out of contract at the end of next season. Does that limit his value? Does that scamper his value? Like, obviously there was rumours all throughout this year that he might end up at another club, but what does that do? Like, what did it do for you when you injured your knee?
Well, yeah, no one was ringing anymore.
They weren't interested. No,
I don't care what anyone says. I'm actually can be funny at times.
Jesus.
Or it'll take us back, all right?
Yep.
Tom Duday, I said publicly, I think it would affect his free agency. He ends up getting a 4-year deal of good money, and Adelaide gets first-round compensation. But if a fit Tom Duday put in his best ever year, he would have got a lot more money than what he got from Brisbane this year. Brisbane were keen to get him. There was a bidding war between the two grand final teams we were hearing, and that's why he got paid pretty well, 6 to 7s over a 4-year deal, as opposed to, I think Jake Lever left Adelaide many years ago at 8s.
Yes.
After the 27 grand final. So that tells you that role, what it could be paid and how desperate someone is to get that role. But clearly injury hit him. I think it might hit Bailey Smith. But the reason the bigger issue that could hit Bailey Smith, he's had some behavioural problems, got caught with some, what do you say? Non-football-like substances where obviously he put his hand up and owned that. But he was coming off the best ever year back in 2021. He decimated our team, Port, in that home prelim final. The Port was expected to get through to the grand final end. And the Dogs, for 3/4 of that game against Melbourne, looked like they were going to win the premiership in 2021 when it was played in Perth. Bailey Smith is bloody superstar. Like, we had that same discussion about Butters or a Rosie. He's every way as good as those blokes. If arguably he's done probably in a way more in that journey, apart from the last sort of 18 months. Before that, you'd say Bailey Smith was far and away ahead of those guys. So I think it's going to be interesting. It's hard getting a market rate, but someone's going to pay. Someone's going to pay for him because, one, what can he do? He can run, he can kick, and he can hit the scoreboard. He can play as a forward, he can play as a midfield. He's a great runner. He's got a commercial side to him where there's big sponsors that align to him. The young girls are appealed to him. You know what I mean? Like he is a Instagram model / footballer as well. So there is that financial element. But the other bit too is if you're going back 15 years and you go on knee reconstruction, not sure where he's going to come back, clubs back themselves in. They know knee recons left, right and centre now for rehab. There's probably about 5 good surgeons well-renowned great surgeons in Melbourne who do all the ACLs, whether you're from any club. Clubs all use the same sort of people. He'd get the best person to get it done. Yeah, no, so he might want to commit to the Bulldogs mid-year, or it might be one that people realise that, like a Tom Duday, is just going to go his rehab and he'll make his decision at the end of the year. But my understanding is he's not a free agent yet. So I think free agency would kick in potentially, I think, maybe 2.5 to 3 years. So
yeah, be the same year as
Rosie and Butters. Yeah. So, and as we know, Butters signed a 2-year extension with Port about a month ago, and he's had 2024, so he's got 25, 26 when he'd be eligible for free agency, and the same thing with Bailey Smith. But make no mistake, people have mentioned Geelong. Mate, people have been mentioning everyone, because would he look better in your team, in your colours? Would he help your club? Oh, absolutely. Wingman, inside midfielder, half forward who can hit the scoreboard. And when he hits the scoreboard, he gets 24 and then he'll kick 2 or 3 goals. He is an absolute superstar, and he's probably your modern midfielder you want. Bloke who can play midfield and increase his minutes, but also hit the scoreboard when he rests forward. So I think whether ACL might dampen it a little bit because he hasn't got current form, and it'll probably take 6 months to get back to his best the following year. But geez, I wouldn't be too concerned. As long as he can get his personal stuff in order, which obviously he looks like. Because let's face it, I've seen vision of him overseas at the Red Bull Centre that Travis spoke, and the like were. So he went to, I think, the US in the off season to get fit and get prepared, and that's what makes it pretty disappointing. But as they say, that's footy.
Yeah. So what do you think? I'll ask you about the Bulldogs, because obviously it's probably a pressure year for them. Luke Beveridge under pressure, premiership coach. Now losing one of his star midfielders, who was a bit of uncertainty about last season. What does it do for them? Does it plummet them probably away from finals contention, or are they still in contention? Or what do you think at this initial stage? Obviously, it's December, but what are your thoughts?
I think, Huddo, first top of mind would be they're the team that can come in, right? And that could potentially shape it because they've got the talent.
Yes.
Now you look at Hugo Hagen, you look at Norton, you look at English, All-Australian ruckman. Montempelli's an absolute superstar. Liberatori's still been an absolute star. McRae was down last year. He could improve. So you go, where's their upside come from? McRae and Bailey Smith. Well, Bailey Smith's now gone, so that makes it harder. But realistically, they got young Darcy, who's good as a key forward. So they got some super talent. The pressure's on Bevo now. Everyone forgets, this is the premiership coach, 2016. So, they've cleared a lot of the decks, the assistant coaches, brought in new faces, new names. So they've gone all in on this one. And I would have suspected if Bailey Smith was fit that they'd fall inside the 8. Mind you, when I pick this time of year, I've got about 12 teams in my 8. But because I think Adelaide, you look at if Adelaide's going to improve, Adelaide should come in too. So you go, who's going to fall out? Sydney? Well, look what Sydney did. They got Grundy. They got Jordan.
Adams.
They got Adams. They got Hambling. Yep. They're probably going to be better depth-wise. Yep. So, GWS, geez, they look better. They got Taranto and Hopper and finish in the top 4. So I think it's an interesting discussion. I think this would make it certainly harder for the Dogs to bounce back quickly. But like anything, to analyse the draw, and it's always on the previous year, how many teams come in? Carlton, they should get better, shouldn't they? But there's no guarantees. Port should be better. They've shored up an era where they've been susceptible, and that's key defence. So
the rucks as well.
Yeah, and rucks. So you go, well, they should be better, but it doesn't necessarily translate that way. But Bulldog supporters would be heartbroken with this news, and obviously the player would be too, and rightfully so, because no one wants to see anyone. As much as you like a team or hate a team or love a player or don't like a player, you don't want to see anyone suffer an ACL.
No. Well, I think that's pretty much it, Treaders, but I'm going to wrap up with something. Right, so after ACL's comeback games, what I want to ask you, and because I think I have in my head what I think yours was, what was your greatest game that you played, do you think?
In my what? After ACLs, I never had an ACL, but yeah, if you're giving me
after
one.
your injuries.
After my realignment of my whole kneecap, yeah.
Yeah, that's the one.
My best game.
Yeah. What
you're gonna probably say the Richmond game.
That is absolutely what I'm going to say is the Richmond game.
Yeah, because you weren't old enough to realise the other games I probably played.
That is absolutely not true. No, first season, my season ticket was 2002. So.
Oh, right. Were you in nappies?
Oh, 7 years old, mate. Jeez.
No, it's funny. Like, I don't know. that was a good game, and that was obviously my biggest game since coming back from
Yeah.
serious injury. And it was funny. It was the year after I gave up the captaincy. So whenever I see someone give up the captaincy to play on,
Mm-hmm.
I always sit there and go, don't underestimate Taylor Walker, what that does
Yep.
for your freshness. Because you'd have to go to all these leadership meetings and penalise a player for sleeping in and what penalty should we do and rah, 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 and what do the coaches want us to do and what training feedback. No, you just rock up and play like a rookie and do as you're told.
Was it relaxing after like relinquishing it?
Oh, yeah, yeah. Yeah, well, because you just, in the end, you realise how much spare time you got. And obviously, I went into media there a few years after retirement. So I was able to put all my next energies into other things I was doing as opposed to sitting on, when I was captain, I was all in. I'm
Yeah.
not saying others aren't, but I sat in on selection every week.
Yeah.
And that was a 3-hour exercise on a Thursday afternoon. Yeah, it
Jeez.
was greatly catered and
I
all
was
that.
gonna say.
But you had to get it. For me, you had to be all in or not. And there was captains since who didn't. I don't think any of the current players since have actually sat in on selection.
Wow.
In my time, I don't think Kasisi did afterwards. I'm pretty sure he didn't. And then Boak and all those guys, I don't think they would have. But for me and Matty Primus used to. And then I was acting captain when he was out injured. It was always a judgment or a decision, and Choco always wanted as much information from the players who are out there and what's happening in the locker room. Because as much as coaches can make out there across it, players see a lot of what behaviours and what people are going on. But then again, not that we're going to have a rat pack, but the rat pack know what everyone's up to, and the captain doesn't know as much because they don't tell the captain because he's close to the coach, if you know what I mean. So, but yeah, so you get freshness off the back of just being rejuvenated and by stepping away from not having the meetings, you get more time with young kids, which I had at the time, more time to do your own business ventures, more time to take the dogs down to the beach and go with the kids and hop in the water for 10 minutes to do extra ice baths, those sorts of things that help freshen you up.
Yeah, easy. Well, that's it for us this week. Thanks for joining us. We'll probably be back next week and then have a bit of a Chrissy break, we reckon. But like, subscribe, do all that jazz, and we'll see you next week.